Our next guest is Olivier Bullion, is the director of the SDG unit at Employment and Social Development Canada. He will talk about Canada's national strategy to achieve the SDGs. Olivier, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Chuck.
For the opportunity to speak with you today about the Government of Canada's commitment to the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. I would first like to acknowledge that I'm joining you today from the ancestral, traditional, and unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation and the Anishinaabe people. As mentioned in the introduction, I am the director of the SDG unit at Employment and Social Development Canada. I'm leading a pluridisciplinary team responsible for the implementation of the 2030 Agenda in Canada, and I will share with you some of the recent developments with respect to the implementation of the agenda in Canada. And I'll take this opportunity to briefly go over two documents: Moving Forward Together, Canada's 2030 Agenda National Strategy, released in February 17th, 2021, and Canada's Federal Implementation Plan, released in July 22nd, 2021 as well. So, of course, what are the SDGs? They are essentially a blueprint, a framework to tackle our most pressing challenges like poverty eradication, inclusive economic growth, environmental protection. They are becoming the common language to articulate social, economic, and environmental sustainability. They are increasingly adopted by governments, companies, and organizations alike. They are a shared responsibility. Achieving the SDGs is about doing our part as a global citizen. It is about thinking globally and acting locally. Basically, we can all contribute at the local level to the greater good, and we should therefore empower our communities to take local actions. So since the ratification of the 2030 Agenda in 2015, the Government of Canada has been committed to advancing the SDGs and is pursuing a number of initiatives, policies, and programs that align with the 2030 Agenda, such as reducing poverty, reconciliation with Indigenous people, advancing gender equality, the empowerment of women and girls, taking action on climate change, clean energy, the oceans. For those who are not familiar with the SDG unit, the team was established in 2018 in Employment and Social Development Canada to support the Minister of Families, Children, and Social Development lead the implementation of the 2030 Agenda in Canada. It's been a busy journey, and I will take you through a brief overview of our milestones to date. So even before the SDG unit was created, Statistics Canada launched the SDG Data Hub in May 2018, and it allowed the government to report on progress against the Global Indicator Framework, the UN developed framework to track the evolution on key indicators supporting the 17 SDGs. Also in 2018, the Government of Canada delivered its first voluntary national review to the United Nations to take stock on progress and chart a path forward. After the establishment of the SDG unit, we undertook nationwide consultations on the 2030 Agenda to raise awareness and inform the development of our national strategy. And in June 2019, an interim report called Towards Canada's National Strategy was released. During the same period, we launched the SVG Funding Program to foster partnership at the national level and stimulate initiatives at the local level. But I will get back to this in a minute. The Canadian Indicator Framework for Sustainable Development Goals was also developed. The Canadian Indicator Framework is an adaptation of the Global Indicator Framework, but to the Canadian context. It highlights Canada's ambition for each of the 17 goals and establishes key targets to be achieved by 2030. And this brings us to February 2021, almost exactly a year ago, when we released Moving Forward Together, Canada's 2030 Agenda National Strategy, the first of the two documents I wanted to tell you a little bit more about. As I mentioned earlier, the 2030 Agenda is a shared responsibility, and achieving the goals require a whole of government and a whole of society effort. Collaborative partnerships are fundamental to achieving the goals. So in this spirit, Moving Forward Together, Canada's national strategy, was released on February 17, 2021. The national strategy is an important call to action, aiming to create and foster an enabling environment for ongoing participation, dialogue, and a whole of society collaboration to help advance progress on the 17 SDGs and achieve the ambitions highlighted in the Canadian indicator framework. The national strategy reaffirms the 5 core objectives and the 30 actions to advance progress on the SDGs outlined in the 2019 interim document. And they can be summarized as follows: ensuring better policy coherence at all levels, supporting the SDGs, mobilizing energies by communicating, raising awareness, and engaging with partners, reporting on progress in full transparency, identifying challenges and opportunities moving forward, advancing reconciliation, but also leaving no one behind and ensuring that vulnerable populations are not forgotten, that they are involved, that they have a voice. And of course, promoting long-term investment around the SDG through our funding program, but also through other departments' programs and initiatives to foster a climate of partnerships across jurisdictions and stakeholders around the SDGs. To deliver on those commitments, to contribute to the creation of this enabling environment, to lead by example, we released in July 2021 Canada's Federal Implementation Plan for the 2030 Agenda. This Federal Implementation Plan is about the federal contribution to the national strategy. It lays out the building block of a whole of government approach. At the federal level, all departments and agencies have a role in integrating the SDGs into their respective policies, programs, and reports. So the Federal Implementation Plan articulates how the federal government will contribute to advancing the national strategy. It establishes lead departments and accountability for each of the SDG and cross-cutting objectives of leaving no one behind, reconciliation with Indigenous people, and Canada's international efforts to advance the 2030 Agenda. It articulates role and responsibilities of leads and contributing departments, central agency, Statistics Canada, and the SDG unit. And it also identifies avenues for cooperation with partners. It establishes a structure where coexists leads for each of the 17 SDGs and leads for horizontal and cross-cutting objectives. When it comes to individual objectives by SDGs, the Canadian Indicator Framework was updated in June 2021 to better reflect the current priorities, ambitions, and data to track progress. This was the result of a comprehensive review of current federal policies, strategies, and initiatives related to the SDGs. As part of the federal contribution to the key objective of the national strategy, we are committed to lead the implementation, of course, of Canada's national strategy and federal approach, continue raising awareness on the 2030 Agenda through a robust engagement and communication strategy, publish an annual report on progress on the 17 SDGs, support progress and partnerships through the SDG Funding Program, and of course, support the 2030 Agenda internationally. In terms of reporting and transparency, we are committed to report annually on progress. The annual report will heavily rely on Canada's indicator framework and the global indicator framework. It will highlight progress by SDG at the national level and identify key contribution by federal departments. But the annual report will also include the contribution of external partners, provinces, territories, municipalities, Indigenous partners, civil society actors, NGOs, academia. We know that the government alone cannot achieve the SDGs. And so to keep on with our commitment to create an environment where everyone can contribute, we wanted the annual report to be an opportunity to engage, share on best practices, and provide a true whole-of-society picture on progress and action. This is why we are presently engaged in consultation with stakeholders and partners to integrate this whole-of-society perspective into Canada's first annual report to be released this summer. This whole-of-society vision is about creating opportunities that enable everyone to take part in advancing sustainable development and act in ways that are meaningful for them and for their communities. This is where the SDG Funding Program comes into play. In 2018, the Government of Canada committed almost $60 million for grants and contributions through the SDG Funding Program. The program supports the work of external stakeholders at all levels of governments, Indigenous organizations, NGOs, civil society, private sector, and education and research institutions. It aims to increase public awareness on the SDGs, support new partnerships, spur collaboration, and identify and implement innovative initiatives to drive progress on the SDGs. There has been a strong interest in the SVG Funding Program since its launch in 2018. 130 projects have been funded to date for a total of approximately 22 million. You will have the opportunity to discover a few of those projects and initiatives if you tune in to our side event tomorrow at 3 p.m. It will be moderated by Minister Gould, so I invite you, of course, all of you to attend and learn more about the results of the funding program. The SVG Funding Program also allocated funding to 3 national indigenous organizations, the Assembly of First Nations, the Métis National Council, and the Inuit Tapirit Kanatami, over 3 years, up to 2023, for a total of $900,000 per organization to support collaboration on the 2030 agenda in a way that respects self-determination and reconciliation. So as I'm coming to the end of my presentation, if there is one thing that I would like you to take away from this presentation, is that our national strategy for the 2030 agenda is really about creating an enabling environment for everyone to be able to take actions in ways that are meaningful to them. And that the federal government is committed to play its part to achieve the ambitions and targets identified in the Canadian Indicator Framework and to foster collaboration on the 2030 agenda. As I mentioned, the federal implementation plan also identifies avenues where we can further increase our collaboration. While so many of you are already involved in implementing the 2030 agenda, where you are, there are many additional ways in which you can participate to have even a bigger impact. For those less familiar with the 2030 agenda, you can first learn more about Canadians' ambitions, Canada's targets, and the SDG indicator at large on the SDG Data Hub and on our webpage. Regardless of who you are, which institutions or organization you represent, you can also determine which priorities align with your work, establish your own ambitions, establish your own target, and track your own contribution. You can engage on the 2030 agenda through different activities, like our SDG Action Networking Series or SDG newsletter, and share on the lesson learned while implementing the 2030 agenda in your community. And for some of you, you can participate in Canada's annual report. As we improve our collection mechanism, we are hoping to reach out to more and more Canadians in the coming year to contribute to the annual report. And of course, you can become a partner through the SVG Funding Program. So in closing, I want to acknowledge that the times we're living are unprecedented. We are facing a number of social, environmental, and economic issues that need to be addressed. And if you want to live a better world for the future, or if we want to live any world at all, and I know we can, we need to act. I know we can. And together we will be able to achieve those results. Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Olivier.
Thank you very much, Olivier. This is really interesting to listen to you and listen to what extent the government of Canada has put in place a system in order to work in a systemic way on the SDGs. And I look forward to seeing the results. You said that SDGs is a framework to solve issues, and we heard people yesterday saying more or less the same thing, that we have to see the SDGs as a framework. And you said that the SDGs is a way for us to be global citizens. In Canada, we have the responsibility to achieve the SDGs and play our part because other countries are doing so as well. And you mentioned how it is important to include vulnerable populations, vulnerable groups. And I'd like to go back to what Jean Becker said earlier. We have an opportunity to change our narrative on marginalized populations. We have to discuss on the systems that marginalize those people and those groups. And so because those people are a symbol of resilience, we have to include them.